Hey guys, it's Sarah, and today we are going to talk about all the books I read in October. 16. What? 16 books in October. That's crazy. It was hard, but I did it. 10 of those books were for my reading project for my young adult literature class, and then the other 6 were just books I wanted to read and books I was reading. So I'm gonna kind of lump them together in class books and other books. So we're just gonna start from the top of my pile, which is other books. So we'll talk about what other books I'm reading. 2 of them are actually books I'm still in the middle of, but I will finish them before the end of the month. So I'm gonna include them because I'm almost done, and I kind of know what my thoughts are gonna be so far. But yeah. So we'll start with those. All right, so the first one is The Poetics. This is by Elizabeth Acevedo. This is something I'm actually listening to on audiobook right now, and I am like this far into it. I don't know if you can see. I have still a little bit more over 100 pages, but it's written in verse. So it's very, very quick, and the audiobook is fantastic. The author narrates it, so I'm really enjoying the audiobook of this. And I will finish it tomorrow, like without a doubt. I only have one more like little session to sit down and listen to, so I will definitely be doing that tomorrow. So I wanted to include it here because I pretty much know what my thoughts are, and I don't see anything huge happening to change them. So I'm gonna go ahead and say that I'm probably gonna give this like a 3.5, which it could be a 4, you never know, but it is following a young girl who is in high school, and, you know, she's dealing with difficult parents. She's dealing with being forced to do things she doesn't want to do. She's dealing with liking a boy for the first time, and it's fine. I'm just having a hard time relating to her, and it's all about her. So it's character driven. It's not plot driven. It's character driven. And because of that, I'm having a hard time really like super caring about what's happening to her, but it's still very good, and I can see the appeal in it for sure. Like, definitely see the appeal. And yeah, so that's gonna be finished like tomorrow, 100%. Right now it's looking at a 3.5, maybe a 4. So if you're following me on Goodreads, you can check there and see what my final rating was, because by the time this video goes up, that'll be done. But yeah. So this actually is for my class. It's going to be for my next part of my reading project, though it wasn't for the actual one that I turned in already, but interesting. And then the other one that I'm still reading, but I do plan to finish it tomorrow as well, is Queen of Shadows by Sarah J. Maas. Now, this one I'm right here. So I'm on page, let's see, almost 400. I'm almost to page 400, and there are over 600 pages in this one, but it is going pretty quickly when I'm sitting down to read. I'm reading about 100 pages a day, a little bit more. I am really enjoying it. It is a little bit slower in certain parts though, so it's kind of, right now it's shaping up to be a 4. I do still have this much more to go though, and I know we're going to hit some more action-y parts, so it may bump it up. But as of right now, it's kind of sitting at a pretty solid 4. Okay, so those 2 I'm still working on, but I'm so close to being done. So I didn't want to push them to November and wait until November to talk about them. So that's what those are. Okay, so continuing on in what I finished, I read The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway. This is one I listened to on audiobook, and it is one that I was trying to read over the summer and do like an unhaul for everything that I hadn't read. But this one I was on the waiting list for the audiobook all summer long. But I finally got it, and I was able to listen to it. I listened to it really, I think in 2 sittings. It was because this is a very short book. It was also pretty boring. I ended up giving it 3 stars because I could see the merit. I could see the writing is fantastic. He was a very, very talented writer. The way that he wrote his stories are great. But I didn't care too much about the story. It was fine. It follows a couple who have a very tumultuous relationship, and it's back and forth and all these things. And they end up going to like a bull fighting event in Spain. And that's kind of like one of the main plots here, because that was actually based on something that Ernest Hemingway actually did. And then he turned it into a story and created characters around that. So it was fine. the characters were complex for sure. It wasn't, you know, like cut and dry, but I don't know. I didn't love it, and I gave it 3 stars, but I can say I've read it. All right, another one that I finally finished is The Last Mrs Parish by Liv Constantine. I finally finished this. I picked this up, I want to say in May, maybe, and I got about 100 pages in, and then I put it down for some other things, and then I just never picked it back up, and I don't know why. And it sat on my TBR cart for forever. And I kept saying, I want to go back to that. I want to go back to that. And I never did. And I don't know why, but I finally picked it back up and I finished it and I loved it. I ended up giving it 4 stars. The reason I didn't give it 5 is because it definitely wasn't unput downable. Obviously, if I put it down in May and then didn't pick it up again until October. But I really, really enjoyed it. So this follows, oh gosh, 2 crazy women. All right, so one of them is Amber, the other one is Daphne. So Amber is a young woman who has put herself into certain opportunities to become friends with Daphne, who is married to a very prominent businessman, and a lot of people know her. He's like semi-famous and they're very rich and all these things. Amber gives herself the opportunity to insert herself into Daphne's life. They become very, very fast friends, and they, you're getting Amber's perspective first and seeing what she's planning to do. And it's not a secret. Like, it's, you know what's happening. You know that Amber is being deceiving and trying to take certain opportunities for herself and taking advantage of Daphne and her position and all that. So you're seeing that happen and you see what her intentions are. And then you flip over to Daphne and see what's happening with Daphne. So I loved it. I liked Daphne's part better. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say, because you really kind of need to go into this not really knowing a whole lot, but it was fantastic. I did give it 4 stars just because it wasn't, you know, like a one shot, I couldn't put this down type thing, but I really, really, really enjoyed it. And I would definitely read more from this author for sure. The next one that I finished is The Broken Girls. This is by Simone St. James, and this was one of my 5-star predictions, so I won't give you my star rating quite yet, but I did listen to this on audiobook, which I definitely recommend. The audiobook was fantastic. This one follows a woman who has lost her sister. Her older sister, I believe, died when she was young, and she was murdered. There is someone who has been in jail for her murder, even though he consistently says he was not guilty. And you follow her still kind of hung up on that and not able to let it go. Her sister died outside a closed down boarding school, which is rumored to be haunted. And so you kind of see her revisiting the school and revisiting the place where her sister died, and she just can't let it go. She is a journalist, and she is also dating a police officer. So you kind of see all that. Some things are happening and things are unfolding, and you're seeing them go through that together. So you also have a dual timeline. So there is a timeline that is also set in the 50s when the school is open, and you see some of the girls that attended the school, and you see how things kind of tie together a little bit. So it was good. I really, really liked it. And that's all I'm going to say. You're going to have to wait for my thoughts on my 5-star prediction follow-up, but the audiobook definitely recommend. So the last book that is not part of any of my reading project is 13 by Steve Kavanaugh. This is the book that you guys voted on me to read, because I was talked about all the books that you guys made the most comments about or had the most feeling toward that I've hauled this year, and had you guys vote on one for me to read, and it was this one. Oh my goodness. Okay. This was so much more than I thought it was going to be. So this follows a lawyer. Now, this is actually book number 4 in a series. The lawyer's name is Eddie Flynn, and there are 3 previous books that feature him. You don't have to read them in order. So I read this one first, and I did not feel like I was really missing out on a whole lot. There's a couple little spots where a previous case was mentioned, but I didn't feel like I was missing a ton of information, and I wasn't able to follow anything because of it. So you can read this one first and not have to worry about that. But this one follows him, and he is helping a case where this very famous person is on trial for murdering his wife and her lover in their bed. Now, he says he didn't do it. And so they're trying to piece all these things together. Now, you're getting Eddie's perspective from all that stuff. You are also getting the perspective from the person who actually killed those people. And you know it's not the guy who's on trial. It's the work of a serial killer, and the serial killer has worked out a way to be on the jury for this case. Okay. I have never read probably a more terrifying person than this, just because of how smart he was. And there's other aspects about him that make him incredibly scary and incredibly dangerous. Yeah, I loved it. I loved it so much. It is gruesome, so keep that in mind. But I loved it. I really thought I was going to really love this, but oh my gosh, did I? It ended up being more than I was expecting. And yeah, I don't want to say too much, because if I tell you too much, then, things are going to be given away. And I think that would take away from the enjoyment of it. But just know the serial killer is on the jury, and you get his perspective, which is a little terrifying. So good though, like legit. I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. I want to read more in this series for sure. Like, I want to read more about Eddie Flynn. So I do plan to actually go back and read 1 through 3 as well. And then there's more, but loved it. If you like thrillers, definitely this one. Okay. So all the rest of these are books that are part of my young adult reading project. So they're all young adult books in different genres and stuff. And I had to turn them in for a project at the end of October. So the first one that I went ahead and read was The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian. This is by Sherman Alexie. And I needed to read this one because I had to read a challenged or a banned book. And this one has been challenged. It's on almost all the lists I was researching, trying to figure out what I was going to read. So I did check this one out from the library. I have taken it back since, because I read it towards the beginning of the month. But this is told in a diary format, and it's by a young Native American boy who is living on a reservation. And he decides one day that he wants to go to the high school that is in the neighboring town, which is predominantly white. And you see him do that, and the transition and the things he goes through and the things that are happening at home as well. This tackles a lot of issues like alcoholism and domestic abuse, racism for sure, and bullying, stuff like that. So there is a lot in here, and it's all there. And there's a lot of derogatory terms used, which, he's explaining things. So I can see why it was challenged for sure. I still don't think any book should ever be banned, but I could understand the argument. It's fine. And this one, is told in a diary format. There's also illustrations throughout it where he's drawing things and you see what he's drawing and stuff. So I thought that added a lot to it. The overall story, I gave 3 stars. I thought it was fine. It wasn't anything mind-blowing or life-changing for me, but it was good. I enjoyed it. By the end, I was kind of done though. I felt like it dragged on a little bit towards the end. But it does deal with, some pretty hard topics. So I gave it 3 stars. And then I picked up one of my favorite books of the year, and that is Scythe by Neil Shusterman. This is the first book in the Arc of the Scythe series. Okay. This book, I don't want to call it a dystopian, because I feel like it's more of a utopian, the world is a better place. But I guess I could kind of see a dystopian too. I think it's officially categorized as fantasy, which I would definitely agree with. So this is set in our world. However, it is set in the future, and society has figured out how to completely do away with death. So there's no illnesses, there's no cancer, there's no dying from a car accident, there's no dying from old age, none of that. People cannot die on their own. Sounds great, right? But because of that, there's no population control. People just keep, you're still having children. You're still keeping the world populated. So because of that, they have created a system where they have people called the Scythes who are tasked with the responsibility of making sure that the population is under control, and they are responsible for killing people. And that's the only way that you can officially die, is if you are gleaned by a scythe. That's what they call it. They call it gleaning. Now, how does the scythe make that decision? Well, there's regulations. There's a lot that goes into the decision making on who is going to be gleaned and who's not, and they have to answer for their actions. They can't just go around gleaning whoever they want to. They have to be able to speak up to that. They have to make sure they're being fair. They have to make sure they're not just killing a certain type of people. It's a whole political system that surrounds that. Now we have two main characters in this one, and it's a boy and a girl. What are their names? I do not remember. Citra and Rowan. Citra and Rowan. And they don't know each other at first, but they are both chosen by a certain scythe to be an apprentice to him and to learn how to become a scythe and to go through some trials to try, like you're basically trying out. And not everyone makes it. Not everyone is chosen to do this, but they are both chosen as apprentices, and they go through all these things to try to become scythes themselves. Now, they both have issues with scythes. They both have their own opinions about it, and they both learn what actually goes into this, and they both learn that, hey, it's not as easy as we thought, and there's a lot more that goes into this than the general public knows. So they both learn a lot as well. They're also learning the competition aspect of all this stuff. It's a whole thing. I don't want to give too much away, but man, did I love this. It was written so well. Neil Schusterman's writing is fantastic. And I now want to read like everything he's ever written. But the way he wove this story was so interesting, and the political system in here is so interesting, and it's very gray. There are some really bad people in here that you see, and you see just how incredibly evil is just like the best word I can think about it. There's a lot of moral gray areas in here as well, because in the end, you're taking a life. And is that okay? But it's your job. But is it okay? And how do you know you're doing the right thing? How do you know you're choosing the right people? There's a lot that goes into it. So I thought that was really interesting. And yeah, I loved it so much. I cannot wait to read Thunderhead, which I will very soon. I have to kind of wait till this class is over, but I can't wait to dive into that one. And then the third book, The Toll, is coming out here this month, I think. And I loved it. One of my favorites of the year. 10 stars if I could. Like legit, it was worth that. So good. Okay, so the next one, I'm not going in the order of how I read it. I'm going in the order of how they're stacked up here, because that's what I have time for. I read Autobiography. This is by Christina Lauren. This was a book that I needed to read for an LGBTQIA+ representation book. And this one definitely qualified for that. And I wanted to read this one because Christina Lauren is one of my favorite authors, and I want to read everything that they write, like everything. So good excuse to pick up another one by them. So this one follows so this is young adult. They actually normally write adult books. So this is a young adult book. And this one follows a young boy named Tanner. He has moved from California to Utah. Now in California, he was an out bisexual boy. He was free to be himself. Everyone knew. They moved to Utah because of his mom's job. And the area that they live in is predominantly Mormon. That kind of forces him back into the closet. Not that he's in denial about himself. He's completely comfortable with who he is, but based on society around him, he has, like, him and his family have made the decision to keep that a secret. So, yeah, very interesting. He ends up taking a writer's course in his senior year of high school, and the teacher tells them that there's going to be a mentor coming in. It's kind of a local celebrity. Like, he's had a book published and everything. He's from the area. He goes to college here, blah, blah, blah. And then in walks Sebastian, who's the mentor. And it's an instant connection between the two. The second the eye contact is made, there's something there. The tricky part is that Sebastian is devoutly Mormon and pretty much in denial about his identity. But there's something there. So these two form a very fast friendship, and it definitely turns into something more. So you see them both trying to deal with this. You see Sebastian trying to accept who he is and trying to figure out how he's still going to be able to live his life the way that he wants to versus the way that he's been raised to live his life. So a lot of, like the Mormon church values have been brought up in here, and how it's challenging Sebastian as a person. And you see him really struggle with, I don't know what the right course of action to take is. The meantime, Tanner is just like, I love you. Like, I can't say that I don't know what to do about it either, but you see them try to work it out together. And I loved it. I absolutely love this book. I gave it 5 stars. I thought it was funny. Christina Lauren has a very humorous writing style, and I love that. Like, this book made me laugh out loud quite a bit. And just seeing them tackle, this really touchy subject of religion and sexuality and all that stuff was very, very interesting. And I believe one of them, Christina Lauren, I think Christina is bisexual from what I'm remembering from the author's note. Let me double check. Sorry, see, I was wrong. Lauren is bisexual as well. So like, a lot of this came from their experiences, because Lauren, I think, lived in the Bay Area like he did, and she was an out bisexual. And then Christina lived in Utah and worked with a high school, and she was like a high school counselor and stuff. So this kind of brought both of their experiences together, which I think was brilliant and just made this book what it is. So I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. And again, gave it 5 stars. And another one that I picked up is The Book of Ivy, and this is by Amy Engel. This is the first book in her Book of Ivy duology. Now, this one I replaced another book with, because the other book that I had picked was way too long. I just wasn't going to have time to get to it. And, okay, let me tell you, this one I was expecting to really enjoy. I've heard a lot of people say that it was like a really surprisingly really good. They just weren't expecting it to be everything that it was, and I completely agree with that. So this book is a dystopian book, and it's set in the future, but the United States has experienced a nuclear war. So society has really just crumbled, and there is a little section of, I want to say it was like 10,000 people or so, that kind of colonized together and said, we're going to block this portion of the world off, and this is where we're going to be, and this is, we fence everything off, and we're going to live, in this area, and we're going to keep each other safe, and blah, blah, blah. So that has happened already. Now, in this society, there were 2 families that were kind of struggling for power in the beginning, and it caused a war within everybody. And so you have one family who wanted things done a certain way, another family that wanted things done a different way, and they kind of fought it out, and one family won. Okay. So that happened. So you have but both the families are still there. So one family is like the founding family, where they like kind of the founder of the area, and then the president, who's the person who's in charge and running things. So it's kind of like that, but the founding family doesn't really have any power. It's the president's family who has all the power, and it stays in the family type thing. So all that to say, this book opens up with an arranged marriage. There are arranged marriages that happen every year in this society. There are teens of a certain age, and you have to be eligible to be married. You do it all based on like a personality test. They pair you up with someone of the opposite sex. One of them is going to be from this side of the area. The other one's going to be from this side of the area, and you're going to merge together. That keeps everybody connected. That creates allies, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So all that is happening, and you're seeing the ceremony happen. And our main character, Ivy, is promised to a boy named Bishop. Bishop is the president's son. Ivy is the founder's daughter. So the two big head honchos, their families are merging for the first time. Okay. Now Ivy goes into this marriage with a plan and a hidden agenda that her and her family have been planning for a long time when they knew that she was going to be the one marrying him. And her plan is to kill him. She is to kill Bishop, and then in turn, her family is going to kill the president, and then her family is going to take over the power that they feel is rightfully theirs and that was taken from them unfairly. Oh, it was good. It was good. I really enjoyed this. I read it really, really quickly. I didn't want to put it down. I just wanted to keep going. Bishop is a new crush. I love Bishop. I love him. I really, really do. He's a new favorite character. I do have the second book, The Revolution of Ivy, which this is only a duology, so I do have the second book, and I do plan to get to that very, very soon, because I really want to keep going and see what's going to happen. So loved it. Definitely want to read more from this author for sure, Amy Engel. And yeah, so I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I didn't give it 5 because there were a couple little things that were still like very teenagery and YA, and took a little bit longer to get through certain aspects of it. But overall, I really, really loved it. Okay. And then I also picked up Looking for Alaska by John Green. Okay. I read this one for a contemporary, which is a required. Okay. I did not enjoy this book all that much. I'm not a John Green fan. He's just not an author that I mesh well with. And it's okay. I did read this one because, number 1, it is on the Great American Reads list. Number 2, he is an extremely popular YA author. And if I'm going to be a librarian talking to kids about YA books, which is very, it will happen at some point in my career, I need to be able to talk about popular authors and be able to at least be able to speak about a little bit of their work. Number 3, Will Wheaton read the audiobook. And I'm all about that. So, yeah, but I did enjoy Will Wheaton reading it, but that's really what made it for me. If I had just been reading this, I would not have enjoyed it as much at all. I maybe would have given it a 2 stars. Based on the audiobook experience, I gave it a 3. So, yeah, but I don't know. I don't mesh well with his characters. I think his characters are teenagers and they're extremely mature, and I just don't buy it completely. I also think a lot of his characters are so impulsive, it's dangerous. This is definitely an example of that. I did not enjoy Alaska as a character at all. And yeah, so this follows a young boy named Miles who goes to a boarding school in Alabama, and he meets a group of people, including a girl named Alaska, and you see their friendship start and the antics they're getting into. And there's rule breaking all over the place, and she was very impulsive and to a very, very dangerous point. And I think it was supposed to be, like, oh, she's so fun and mysterious, but I was like, you're an idiot. Like, sorry, you are. So yeah, didn't mesh well with it, but I ended up giving it 3 stars. But if you're going to read this, definitely listen to the audiobook. And then I needed to read a nonfiction book, so I read The 57 Bus. This is by Dashka Slater. This follows the true crime story about a young agender person who is riding the bus home from school in Oakland, California in 2013. And while they are on the bus, they end up falling asleep because they're just tired. And another young man on that bus sets fire to their skirt, and that results in this person's body, like half their body, being set on fire on a public bus. So all this actually really happened. I didn't know anything about this case before I read this book, so I went into it pretty blind. So I thought that was a good way to go into it, because I didn't really have any preconceived notions about it. And I think the way that this is written, that's a good way to go into this if you haven't heard about this case, because it really paints the portrait of both of these people, both of Sasha, who is the agender person, and it goes through their background and how they found their identity and what they prefer and, you know, all that stuff. So it goes into their background. It also goes into Richard's background, who is the boy who set them on fire. And you see where he came from, what he's dealt with in his life, things he's doing, things like that. So it sets them both up, and then it talks about the actual incident, and then you kind of see some of the aftermath as well. So it was interesting. I really enjoyed it, and I thought it was written really well, and I gave it 4 stars. And then I read One of Us is Lying by Karen M. McManus, and this one follows 5 teenagers who go into detention one day. They all get detention for the same type of thing, and there are some people in detention that you wouldn't think would be in detention, so it's a little weird that they all got it for the same type of thing that they would never, like, you know, they're really confused about why they're even in there. And then something really tragic happens in that detention session, and one of them dies. So now the other 4 survivors are looked at as suspects, and you kind of see things unfold. You see police investigations, you see questions happening, you see these 4 practically strangers coming together and trying to figure out what exactly happened to their classmate. I really liked this a lot. Really liked it a lot. I kind of figured out what was all happening by the end of it, but it was still like, it was that, but it was more as well. So it was really interesting. You can definitely see some motives of all 4 of these people. So motives are brought up, and you can understand those motives. There's also some relationships that happen in here that probably wouldn't have normally happened, which I thought was great. And you see some really good character development in all of these people, like all 4 of these people. There's some really great character development for them as well throughout it. And it almost seemed like they were all different people at the end, and I loved that. So really enjoyed it. I'm definitely going to read the sequel. There's a sequel coming out in January called One of Us is Next. And then she's going to have another book coming out in, oh gosh, I want to say November of next year. So another year from now, but it already has been announced that there's going to be another one from her. So that's exciting. And then I know she has another published book out already that I haven't read yet, but I do plan to read that one too. So really enjoyed it. Gave this one 4 stars. There was still kind of like some, you know, teenagey, really type things that happened in here. So I did knock a star off for that, but overall really enjoyed it. Definitely a fan of her. And then I picked up a graphic novel, and that is The Prince and the Dressmaker, and this is by Jen Wang. So this one follows a young dressmaker who's living in Paris, and she's just kind of a little seamstress and, you know, just kind of making her way through. She has big dreams, though, of becoming, you know, this famous fashion designer. She ends up making a daring dress for a client, and she makes exactly what this client asked for, but it's very inappropriate for the ball that she's going to, which is being hosted by Prince Sebastian, who is right here. Now, Sebastian takes notice of this dress because it's a big shocker, and he immediately sets out to find out who made that dress. He finds Frances, who's the dressmaker, and he hires her as his personal seamstress. Now, what she goes into it not knowing is that Sebastian has a secret to where he enjoys wearing women's dresses and wants to go out in society and wear these dresses and, you know, be this completely different person other than Prince Sebastian. When she learns about that, she's totally on board, and she makes him these beautiful dresses and helps him get ready and to go out and to be part of, you know, Paris society under this disguise. And he creates kind of this alter ego where he's going out and people are starting to recognize who he is, thinking it's a woman, and that, you know, her dresses are becoming kind of the height of fashion and setting trends and stuff. But no one can know that it's him, and no one can know that she's the one who made the dress because everyone knows that she's his personal seamstress. So it's a whole thing. You see them struggle. You see her struggling with, I'm making these dresses and getting the attention, but I'm not really getting the attention because nobody knows it's me and no one can know it's me because they're going to know it's you in return. So you see all that happening. At the same time, he's having to meet all these princesses because he's supposed to choose a bride. He doesn't really want one, and he can't be himself with anybody except for Frances. So you see him struggle with that too. I ended up giving this one 3 stars. I think part of it is because I thought the story was really good and it sends a really good message, but the ending was a little weird. There's a thing that happened with the king at the end that I was just kind of like, okay. And it's a graphic novel, so it's short, and like this is it. So when I read something that's a graphic novel that doesn't continue on and I don't have more time with the characters, I tend to find it hard to care about them because I read this in one sitting. So it was just like a one and done type thing. So it's hard for me to connect to the story in a meaningful way just because it's over so fast. So that's more of a me problem than the book problem, but I don't know. So I enjoyed it. I thought it was good overall, but I just gave it 3 stars because it wasn't something that was like life-changing for me or that I'm like screaming about and like everybody has to read this. If you want to read it, it's good. But it wasn't like an overall favorite of mine. And then I picked up, oh my gosh, another favorite of the year. And that's Illuminae by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. This is a young adult science fiction. Okay. I cannot stress this enough. You have got to read this book physically and listen to the audiobook at the same time. That is like, I can't stress it enough. You have to do this. It is so good that way. I would have enjoyed either one as well, like separately, but together it just made it so much better for me. So this book is told in transcripts and it's told in messages and it's told in emails and like all sorts of different medias and stuff like that. So the audiobook is a full cast. There's sound effects. There's just, oh, it's so good. It's so good. Okay. So this book follows Katie and Ezra. Katie and Ezra are dating teenagers who in the very beginning of this book, they break up. They break up their relationship. They're not getting along. It's not working out. So they break up. The same day they break up, their spaceship is attacked and everyone's sent into chaos. People are fleeing to other spaceships. They get separated. So he goes to one spaceship. She goes to another one to find shelter and to be okay. So they're separated for a little bit and then they end up finding each other again on like these messaging systems, which is supposed to be kind of secret. No one's really supposed to be able to do that. They both figure out how they can do it. So you see them communicating back and forth and sharing information and trying to figure out what is happening. In the meantime, there's a warship on the way to them to take them out. There is also an artificial intelligence system that is like going crazy and taking over things. And there's a virus that breaks out that is making people crazy and turning them into killers. And oh my gosh, it's a whole thing. I loved it. It was thrilling. It was dangerous. It was pretty scary in a few parts. Katie and Ezra are really, really smart. They are so funny. Like Jay Kristoff's humor in here, I could pinpoint it. I was like, that's Jay Kristoff. That's Jay Kristoff. Oh my gosh. Ezra, I can't. Ezra is Jay Kristoff. Like, oh, it was so good. I love his humor. And I loved it so much. I really, really did. I thought I was going to, but oh my gosh, did I. And just both the experiences together, it's perfection. So I do plan to read the other 2 books. I have them, and I do plan to do the same thing where I'm going to sit down and read through them and listen to them at the same time because I really feel like that's the only way to do it. I can't do it any other way. So 5 stars, loved it. And then the last book to talk about is Stalking Jack the Ripper. This is written by Carrie Maniscalco. This is the first book in the Stalking Jack the Ripper quartet, I believe. There's 4. I think number 4 just came out. And this one is, I guess I would categorize it as a historical fiction. I think I would categorize it that way. And it follows a young woman named Audrey Rose who is living in 1888 in Victorian London. And she is fascinated with death and the human body and what happens to the human body after it dies, and studying cadavers and organs and all that very unladylike things that she should not be involved in, because that's man's work, basically. Victorian London, that's how things were viewed. Now, she has to keep this all secret because society would not accept that, and she goes a little bit not undercover, but she disguises herself as a boy so that she can attend her uncle's seminars on this kind of stuff and go to medical school that way. And she works with her uncle like at night when no one knows what she's doing. Now, while she's working with him, she meets another one of his like apprentice type people named Thomas, and you see these three, her uncle and Thomas, kind of not take over, but they help with some bodies that are found and giving kind of expert opinions on what happened to their bodies and, you know, why and whatever. And these bodies end up being the victims of Jack the Ripper. So Jack the Ripper is very much alive and present in this book, and you're seeing him kill these prostitutes, which actually really did happen. And you're seeing them try to solve these cases. So, okay. I ended up giving this one 3 stars. Here's why. Number 1, I like the idea of her going to medical school under a disguise, but that was like, there was one scene of that really, and then she stopped going. So I was a little bit disappointed in that. I thought that would be a little bit longer and, you know, kind of hold a little bit more weight in the story, but it didn't. Number 2, Audrey is very much a feminist in a time where feminism like wasn't a thing. And it almost got annoying to the point where she was just complaining constantly, and it was brought up so much that she's held to a certain standard and that she's expected certain things, but she doesn't want that and blah, blah, blah. And after a while, I was like, I get it. You know, I get that you don't want to be wearing the frilly dresses and doing all these things. I get it. So it got a little bit much for me. Part of it, like I have that personality, okay, but like it doesn't have to be on every other page. You know what I mean? That it's bothering you that people think that you need to be a certain way. I get it. So that got a little bit too much. And then third, Jack the Ripper is actually identified in this book. So obviously she took very many liberties on that because Jack the Ripper was not someone that was ever identified. But in here, he was. So you know who Jack the Ripper is. You see them solve these things and figure out what's happening and all that. So that was interesting, definitely a twist on it. But some of the victims of Jack the Ripper were real. Like the author actually used real victims of Jack the Ripper. So some liberties were taken. She does do a really good author's note about that, about the liberties that she took and why, and, you know, all that stuff. So that was interesting. But overall, I mean, in the end, I enjoyed it. It did take me a while to read it. It took me almost the whole month, but there were just some aspects that weren't my favorite, but it wasn't enough to make me stop reading it or to give it like a really low rating or anything. Overall, I did enjoy the story and I gave it 3 stars. I would probably read the rest of the books as well. I think I would be interested in going on. I won't buy them. I'll get them from the library, but yeah, so they were interesting. Okay, that's it, guys. Whew, I've been talking a long time. Okay, 16 books. So much. So much. And then too, I'm still like, I will finish them before the end of the month, but I'm still like not quite there just based on when I had time to film. So this was the day for filming and I didn't want to wait another month to talk about them. So, all right, let me know down below if you guys have read any of these. And yeah, I guess that's it. Okay, I gotta go because I've been talking a long time. Okay, I will see you guys again soon. Hope you have a great day. Bye.